The biggest scam in Canada. This is a two-part series. You're not going to want to miss both parts. Let's go.
I think clearly we need to do a better job of explaining some of the things we've been doing. Carbon pricing certainly being one of them. We've seen certainly in the last few months that there's a shift on the issue of carbon pricing in Canada. I think we need to continue explaining why we're doing this to Canadians.
That is an excellent question. Why are you doing this to Canadians? We have elderly people living in tents because their pension doesn't give them enough money to cover the essentials of life. You are crippling us with your carbon taxes. He says that people are waking up. Absolutely, they're waking up. They're waking up to the fact that their bank accounts are empty because of this radical environmentalist. Let's continue.
Why we need to fight climate change, why we're putting in place these measures that we are putting in place. But, you know, it is more complex to explain that than to say you should just not do this. You should not do this, not do that, without offering anything. It's the total absence, as Jean-Yves was saying. It's the absence of vision. It's the absence of plan. He has no measure to offer when it comes to fighting climate change, adapting to the impacts of climate change. He would rip apart the first ever national adaptation strategy, which will help save lives in Canada, which has already started to help save lives, which will save.
Wow, is this not misinformation and disinformation? If the carbon tax is saving all these lives, you need to provide us with evidence and not just spew garbage out of your mouth. How many lives and how did it save them? Let's continue.
Save Canadians billions of dollars. If we don't do that, Canadian taxpayers are on the hook for, according to various estimates, between $25 and $35 billion of climate change impacts per year. We're all paying for this. No one will get a bill home saying this is your climate change impacts bill for the year, but we will all be paying for that. And
okay, let me get this straight. So he's saying that the economic impact of climate change costs Canada $35 billion per year. How exactly is the carbon tax going to reduce the amount of floods that's happening across Canada? Look at Montreal, look at Toronto this summer. What about the forest fires? Look at Jasper. All of these disasters could have been mitigated with upgrading our infrastructure and doing forest management. But no, they 100% solely blame it on climate change. So we're going to continue to get hit by the $35 billion in climate change impact because a tax does not control the weather. And then we have China that continues to spew CO2 into the atmosphere, and guess what? The borders does not stop CO2. Then on top of the $35 billion yearly, we get a $25 billion hit to our economy yearly provided to us by the PBO office. So we get hit twice. First, from the climate change impact because taxes don't stop the weather, and then two, the economic damage that's been caused by the carbon tax. Both of these crippling our economy. It makes absolutely perfect sense, doesn't it? Let's keep going.
It's a great question that you ask about carbon pricing. Now, the one reason for which Pierre Poilievre might want to have an election very soon on Axe the tax and carbon pricing is that he's starting to feel the change in Canadians' understanding of the great value of that carbon pricing. Now, we have changed the name now to make it better understood that there's a carbon rebate that comes with carbon pricing. Now, if you look at the numbers, you note that Canadians understand much better now in September 2024 that 8 out of 10 of Canadians receive more in their pockets than they pay through the carbon price. Now, that's not good news for Pierre Poilievre, now, who has never acknowledged that with carbon pricing also comes a carbon rebate, which makes life more affordable for 8 families out of 10. I'm an economist, and it's very rare that an economic policy achieves the goal of, say, reducing pollution and putting more money in the pockets of the majority of middle class and lower income Canadians. Now, he knows that, and he fears that. Canadians are starting to understand that it's good for affordability, it's also good for reducing pollution, and it's also great, as Mark Carney was saying, and as loads of business leaders are telling, it's also great for prosperity, economic growth, creation of good middle-class jobs across Canada.
When he said he's an economist, probably the worst economist in history, this carbon tax is crippling us Canadians. Do they even listen to what they say to us? They take thousands of dollars from us, give us a couple hundred back. That's if you even get something. Then you go to the grocery store and you can't even buy anything with their $200 because it's gone up so much. It's so ridiculous. In their minds, it sounds absolutely wonderful, but in reality, it's making Canadians broke, homeless, and starving. Did you know it costs $200 million just to administer the rebates to Canadians? That money just goes poof. You can't make any of this stuff up. They still think that 8 out of 10 Canadians are better off. They think if they say that enough times that people will actually believe them. They just look more and more ridiculous when they keep repeating those talking points. Canadians are actually quite smart. We're looking at these two and going, you know what? Canadians have never been so broke in their life, and it's all because of the radical climate change policies. This is part 1. I can't wait to deliver you part 2. The biggest scam in Canada. This is part 2. Part 1 was the ignition switch. Part 2 is the explosion. This is the best part of the series. Be ready to be blown away. Make sure you watch the video to the very end because that is when I'll be dropping the payload with facts and data. Let's go.
What Mr. Carney, and I've spoken with Mark about this a number of times, has said is that those who say that we should scrap carbon pricing need to tell us what they would replace it with. And I've said that many times. If someone in this country, on this planet, in this solar system, in this universe, can show me a measure that will give us 40% of our 2030 emission reduction targets at no cost to Canadians, I'll take it right away. I'm buying it.
He's not buying anything. There are unlimited ways that we can lower our emissions by not only 40%, but 300% below net zero. And it won't cost Canadians a damn thing. Also, it will make Canada the richest country on planet Earth. I will share the data shortly. What the hell is he talking about? Someone in this country, on this planet, in this solar system, in our universe. I think he took a spaceship to the far reaches of our galaxy and he left his brain there and then came back to Earth.
There is no such measure. It is the most efficient way of reducing emission. It's not.
There is such a measure, but the problem is they're making way too much money with this carbon pricing and their green slush fund. Let's keep going.
It's not the only one because we're doing a bunch of other things. Investment, we're doing clean electricity standards, we're working on zero emission vehicles, investing in a cleaner economy. There's lots of other things we're doing.
When he says investments, what he's saying is he's using our tax dollars to create expensive EVs, 5 to 8 times more expensive than Chinese EVs. What a waste of our Canadian tax dollars.
But if there's a measure out there that will give us 40% of our emission reduction by 2030, I've been looking at this for a quarter of a century, and frankly, I don't know about it.
He's not been looking at all. We got a few more clips to get through, and then I'm going to show you some data and information that's going to blow your mind. We're not only going to get below 40% reduction, we're going to be 300% below net zero.
And I would add 2 more things. In addition to the benefits that Stephen mentioned, not only does it come with no cost to Canadians.
What the hell did he just say? The carbon tax has no cost to Canadians? After he made that comment, everything they say moving forwards is discredited.
But again, for 8 out of 10 families, it comes with a benefit. No, they get more in their pockets.
I don't know about you, but I get nothing back from this government. Do you? The parliamentary budget officer came out and said Canadians are worse off with carbon pricing than without carbon pricing. You're going to want to pay very close attention to what this man says next.
An additional benefit is an international border benefit. Soon you'll be hearing, if you haven't heard about this, border adjustments, carbon border adjustments, which mean that if Canada wants to maintain competitiveness, wants to keep being competitive with the rest of the world, including with Europe, which is currently designing a carbon adjustment tariff with those countries that don't have a carbon price. Now, Canada has a carbon price and therefore is able to compete and to keep competing competitively with European countries in the future, in the long term and in the short term.
Did you get all that? All right, it's time for me to deliver some of my payload. He just said that Europe won't deal with Canada if we don't have carbon pricing. Let's take a look at the top polluters on planet Earth. And yes, they have zero, and I mean absolutely zero, national carbon pricing. The second largest emitter on planet Earth, our best friend, the United States, does not have a national carbon pricing system. The absolute number one by a long shot polluter on planet Earth, China, zero carbon pricing. India, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Australia, Brazil, and South Africa, zero carbon pricing. It's a scam, ladies and gentlemen. It's all a scam. You think Europe's not going to deal with all these other countries? Yeah, right. And all of these countries are looking at Canada, scratching their head and saying, how does the population allow such robbery?
Now, Pierre Poilievre's problem is that he will soon be reminded by many business leaders that if he keeps being against carbon taxation, is going to undermine the competitiveness of Canadian industries abroad. So he's going to explain why he should undermine the ability of businesses and workers to compete internationally, given his resistance and his perhaps lack of understanding of the importance of carbon pricing in Canada and internationally.
We have to thank the guy upstairs. We have somebody like Pierre that sees right through this garbage. I have a question for you. Absolutely everything that you see in the store comes from China. Are we gonna stop buying things from China if they don't adopt a carbon pricing? Fair question.
So I haven't seen this opinion by this expert, and I'm no expert on Vancouver Island politics. Obviously, what Pierre Poilievre is trying to do is conflate a number of things together. Of course, we know that inflation has affected purchasing power of many Canadians and is affecting their bottom line. The Bank of Canada was very clear. Carbon pricing is not a contributor to inflation in this country.
This is from the Bank of Canada. They literally told us if they drop the carbon tax tomorrow or today, it would reduce our inflation by 0.6% overnight. So our inflation rate would drop by 24% from 2.5 to 1.9%, saving hundreds of thousands of Canadians from financial insolvency.
So I think our job is to continue explaining to Canadians the differences between these things. And we're seeing inflation come back. We're seeing wages starting to catch up to what we've seen in terms of inflation. So I mean, Pierre Poilievre is simply not telling the truth. He's lying to Canadians about this, and as well as a number of other things. We need to keep explaining why these things are important, both in terms of affordability, as Jean-Yves has outlined. How often do you get a policy that allows you to reduce pollution and help Canadians, 8 out of 10 Canadian families with affordability? You don't get that very often. It's both an environment and a social measure at the same time. We need to continue explaining that, and Pierre Poilievre can continue with his meaningless slogans.
Yeah.
If you made it this far in the video, you are in luck, because I'm going to drop the data and facts on how Canada could reduce our emissions by 300% below net zero. It will cost the population nothing, and it will make us the richest country on planet Earth. Burning natural gas emits 50% less CO2 than the best coal technology. China has 3,092 active coal-fired power plants that results in 5.56 billion metric tons of CO2 annually. Canada emits 700 million tons of CO2 annually. Think about this. Canada has an estimated 1.4 trillion cubic feet of natural gas reserves. If we sold our natural gas to China, replacing all their coal power plants, it would reduce their 5.56 billion metric tons of CO2 in half. So if Canada emits 700 million tons of CO2, we would actually be below net zero by over 2 billion tons. We could also get carbon credits and sell those carbon credits to the world to enrich our nation. Also, all the jobs and money coming into our country selling our natural gas, we could literally eliminate income tax in Canada and be the richest country on planet Earth. This solution is common sense. Share this video with every single person you know. I'd love to hear from you in the comment section. Thanks for watching.